My friends, we gather here not to add another truth to the mind, nor to collect ideas with which to improve the human scene, but to behold a spiritual principle that has been true from the beginning and will remain true to the end of time. If you have ever felt distant from God, if you have believed that God was somewhere beyond your reach, or if you have struggled to find the presence that seems always one step away, I want you to know that there is only one reason for this sense of separation, and it is not because God is absent, nor because you have failed, nor because you have not prayed enough or studied enough. The only barrier, the only veil, is the universal belief in two powers. The belief that there is God on one side and something unlike God on the other. The moment that belief is accepted, even unconsciously, you step out of the awareness of heaven and into the realm of appearances. You begin to battle with shadows, to treat the world of effect as though it possessed power, and to search for God as though he were not the very life that animates your being. The infinite way stands on a single foundation. There are not two powers. There is only one presence, one power, one life, spiritual, invisible, indivisible, and everything that has seemed to oppose you, frighten you, or threaten you has had its existence only in the imagination that believes in a power apart from God. Today, as we move deeper into this hour, let us be willing to release every notion that the world, the body, the mind, or any circumstance has authority over us. Let us come with empty hands, empty thoughts, willing hearts, prepared to discover that separation has never existed, and that the presence we seek is the very essence of our own being. When this truth dawns, even faintly, the entire structure of fear begins to dissolve, for you cannot fear that which has no power, and you cannot be separated from that which is the substance of your life. And so we begin with this simple but profound recognition. There is only God, and nothing stands beside God to oppose, resist, or diminish the infinite. In this realization, the search ends, the struggle ends, and the journey home begins, not outward, but inward, to the kingdom that is already here. Now, let us look more deeply at how this sense of separation ever arose. For the infinite itself knows nothing of division, nothing of conflict, nothing of opposing forces. Therefore, anything that claims such existence must originate not in spirit but in the human mind. From the moment human consciousness began to interpret life through the five senses, a great misunderstanding took root: the belief that what is seen, heard, touched, tasted, or smelled has authority, substance, and power. And because these impressions are many, the mind concluded that power is many. It saw health and disease, success and failure, love and hate, abundance and lack, and it believed that each pair represented two opposing realities. But, my friends, the moment you accept that appearance has power, you have unknowingly declared that something stands beside God, and in that single instant the world becomes a battlefield rather than a garden. The body becomes a power, the economy becomes a power, weather becomes a power, people become powers for good or for harm, and you begin to live between forces that push and pull you. This is the birth of what we call the illusion, not because appearances do not seem real, but because they have no life of their own. The human mind, unaware of the one invisible presence that forms all being, divides the indivisible and then fears the shadows it has created. But spirit knows no such division. Spirit knows only its own infinite, harmonious expression. So as long as you identify with the human mind and its judgments, you will experience life as a conflict of powers. But the moment you turn inward, even slightly, you begin to sense that beneath the appearance is a single, undivided life, moving in perfect order. You begin to see that disease does not oppose health, for both are mental images imposed upon the one spiritual body. You begin to see that lack does not oppose supply, for both are interpretations of the one spiritual storehouse. The human mind divided the indivisible, but consciousness, your true self, remains forever whole. And until this is recognized, you will continue to fight phantoms, never realizing that the battle ends the moment you refuse to grant power to anything external. So we begin to awaken by questioning the very thing the world takes for granted, the belief that anything has power apart from God. This recognition is the first crack in the shell of separation. It is the beginning of freedom. When the Master said, "I can of my own self do nothing," he was not speaking from humility, nor offering a poetic phrase to inspire future generations. He was revealing the fundamental law upon which all spiritual power rests. For the human sense of I, the personal, striving, fearful, self-defending identity, is the very one that believes in two powers. It is this sense of I that worries, reacts, resists, fights, achieves, and suffers. And it is this I that stands outside the kingdom, forever trying to enter through effort. But the true I, the I that existed before Abraham, the I that is the life of every individual, is the very presence of God expressing itself. And so, when Jesus proclaimed he could do nothing of himself, he was declaring the utter impotence of the personal self and the absolute sufficiency of the infinite invisible that lived as his being. This is the point at which the spiritual path truly begins. When you stop expecting the human mind to accomplish what only spirit can do. When you recognize that your personal thoughts, calculations, fears, and desires cannot heal, cannot prosper, cannot harmonize, cannot save. In that moment, the burden shifts from the shoulders of the finite to the freedom of the infinite. You begin to see that every attempt to fix life through personal will only strengthens the illusion of separation. The more you try to be strong, the more you affirm weakness. The more you try to manipulate conditions, the more reality you give to the conditions themselves. But when you rest in the truth that the personal sense of I has no power, no wisdom, no capacity to act, you make way for the one power to reveal itself. You begin to experience what the Master meant when he said, "The Father within me, he doeth the works." This does not diminish you. It liberates you. It releases you from the impossible task of managing the universe and restores you to your rightful place as a transparency through which the infinite shines. And so, the most powerful realization you can ever come to is this: nothing is expected of you as a human being, for the human is not the doer of spiritual works. Your function is not effort. Your function is recognition. The moment you shift from the personal I to the divine I, you stand at the threshold of true spiritual power, where the works are done through you, not by you. And in that awareness, fear dissolves, for you are no longer a separate being facing a hostile world. You are the presence of God expressing itself as you. And now we come to an illustration so simple that the human mind will overlook it, yet so profound that it can dissolve years of fear in a single moment of recognition. Consider your hand. This hand can comfort or it can strike. It can give or withhold. It can build or destroy. And yet, the hand itself has no power. It is neither good nor bad. It is neither moral nor immoral. It is neither creative nor destructive. All that the hand appears to do is but the expression of the consciousness that animates it. If the consciousness is loving, the hand expresses love. If the consciousness is fearful, the hand expresses fear. The hand is an effect. Consciousness alone is the cause. And so it is with every condition of life, every circumstance, every appearance. Nothing in the world of form has power. No body, no disease, no bank account, no person, no weather, no government, no event. These are but hands, so to speak, effects without inherent authority. But the moment you begin to treat these effects as causes, you have stepped into the illusion of two powers. You begin to fear what the body can do, what money can do, what people can do, what circumstances can do. You no longer see that the only real power is the invisible presence that forms, maintains, and sustains all being. You see, my friends, the hand cannot lift itself, cannot move itself, cannot choose itself. It is moved by something deeper. In the same way, no condition can act of its own nature. No appearance can control your life. No external circumstance can dictate your experience unless you grant it the power your consciousness alone possesses. The moment you say, "This condition frightens me," you have given power to the shadow. The moment you say, "This problem has authority," you have forgotten the source. But when you look at any appearance and quietly realize this has no power, it is neither good nor bad, it is only an effect, you withdraw the belief that sustains the illusion. You return to the awareness of the invisible cause, the I that moves all creation. And in that recognition, the appearance begins to dissolve, not because you changed the effect, but because you withdrew the false belief that gave it life. All healing, all harmony, all peace is found the moment you stop fighting shadows and turn instead to the source. For the cause is God, the infinite invisible, and the effect is only the outer picture, and the outer picture has no power in itself. None. The moment this becomes clear even slightly, the entire drama of fear and struggle begins to fall away, for you see that nothing external has ever had authority over the one who lives as your very being. Now, having seen that the appearance has no power and the cause is always the invisible presence, we must understand the most difficult and yet most liberating principle of spiritual living. Never resist a problem. The world teaches resistance. Fight the illness, fight the lack, fight the circumstance, fight the person. But the moment you resist, you have declared another power. You have affirmed that something stands beside God, capable of acting in opposition to the infinite. Resistance is the birth of fear, and fear is always the admission of two powers. In the infinite way, we meet every appearance not with resistance, but with recognition. When a problem presents itself, be it a pain in the body, a disturbance in the home, a fear in the mind, you do not rush to fix it, you do not analyze it, you do not hold it as real in and of itself. Instead, you turn inward and silently remember, this has no power, only God is power. In that stillness, you withdraw the belief that sustains the appearance. The body may be screaming for attention, the mind may be pleading for solutions, the world may be demanding immediate action, but the spiritual response is always the same. Be still, turn within, and recognize the one presence. You are not ignoring the human picture. You are seeing through it. You are refusing to grant power to the effect. You are lifting the entire situation into the light of spiritual awareness. And as you do, something very sacred occurs. The appearance begins to lose its reality, not because you have forced it away, but because you have ceased to feed it with fear. When you stand in non-resistance, You stand where Christ stood, resting in the assurance that the Father within doeth the works. This is why Jesus never argued with a condition, never struggled with it, never fought with it. He simply recognized the perfection of God where the world saw imperfection. And in that recognition, the appearance dissolved of its own weightlessness. The moment you resist nothing, you discover that nothing external can harm you, influence you, or bind you because nothing external has power. Instead, you meet every situation with a quiet inner confidence. The recognition that the infinite, invisible, the presence within, is the only activity, the only law, the only life operating anywhere. And as this becomes your practice, you begin to find that problems lose their urgency. They no longer terrify you, because you know that nothing can oppose the one presence that lives your very being. In non-resistance, you are lifted into spiritual authority, not the authority of domination, but the authority of truth recognized. And from that awareness, harmony unfolds naturally, without effort, without struggle, without fear, because the only power that ever was is now consciously acknowledged as your life. Many years ago, when students first began coming to me for help, I quickly discovered something remarkable. Healings did not occur because we changed the condition, nor because we applied some mental force to overcome it, but because even for a brief moment, the individual or the practitioner caught a glimpse of the truth that there is only one power. I remember a woman who came with a long-standing physical ailment, one that had been treated, analyzed, and feared for many years. She fully believed the condition had power to limit her, power to frighten her, power to determine her experience. But as we sat together in silence, I did not treat the disease. I did not speak to the body. I did not attempt to change the outward form. I simply rested in the awareness that God alone is power, and the body, being an effect, has none. In that stillness, a shift occurred, not in the body first, but in her consciousness. She later said, "For the first time, I sensed that the problem had no reality of its own, and within days, the appearance dissolved like a shadow, fading before the sun." The healing came not from effort, but from the dissolution of the belief in two powers. And there was a businessman overwhelmed by financial pressures that seemed insurmountable. Every letter that arrived, every bill, every conversation reinforced his conviction that circumstances possessed power over him. But when he learned to sit quietly and recognize that supply is not in money, not in clients, not in employment, but in the infinite invisible expressing as his consciousness, the entire picture changed. The moment he stopped fearing conditions and began acknowledging the one source operating as his life, opportunities appeared where none had existed before. Nothing in the outer world caused the change. The change occurred in consciousness, and the outer simply mirrored the inner. And I recall a family torn by conflict, each person convinced that another held the power to wound them. But when even one member of that family began to see the others not as separate egos but as expressions of the one life, the tension began to dissolve. It was not a matter of human reconciliation. It was the recognition that there is only one self appearing as many. The moment duality was dropped, harmony revealed itself. You see, my friends, these are not miracles in the human sense. They are the natural outcome of spiritual law. When you stop feeding the illusion with belief, the illusion cannot stand. When you refuse to grant power to conditions, conditions lose their authority. When you accept the truth of one power only, you stand in the same consciousness that healed the sick, raised the dead, and stilled the storm, not because you do anything, but because you have returned to the reality that nothing exists to oppose the infinite. These stories are not meant to inspire you with hope. They are meant to reveal a principle. The moment you withdraw your belief in a second power, harmony begins to unfold of its own accord, not through effort, not through struggle, but through the simple recognition of truth. And now, my friends, we come to the heart of spiritual living, the practice through which the truth of one power becomes not merely something we believe, but something we experience. For truth, until it is felt within, remains only a statement. It has no transforming influence. It is through the conscious practice of the presence that the illusion of duality gradually dissolves and the one power becomes the living reality of our being. The practice is simple, but not easy for the human mind, for it asks nothing of the mind and everything of the spirit. You begin by becoming still, truly still, without words, without requests, without the desire to change, heal, improve, or achieve. You sit, not to speak, but to listen, not to think, but to be receptive. And as you enter that stillness, you acknowledge, silently, gently, almost as a whisper within yourself, there is only one presence here. There is only one power. You are not trying to make something true. You are not forcing a spiritual thought. You are merely recognizing what already is. Then you rest in that awareness. You do not hurry the silence. You do not watch the clock. You do not wait for a result. You simply let the mind grow quiet, and in that quietness, the presence begins to make itself known, not as a voice necessarily, not as an emotion, but as a deep sense of peace, a soft inner assurance, a recognition that something is here, something greater than thought, greater than effort, greater than the problem that troubled you. And as this spiritual stillness becomes familiar, you begin carrying it with you into daily activities. While walking, you pause inwardly. Only one power. While working, you remember, there is no power in the outer world. All power is within. When a disturbance arises, you do not immediately react. You withdraw into the inner sanctuary and allow the one presence to bear witness for itself. This practice is not for moments of crisis alone. It must be lived through the small, ordinary tasks of daily life until the recognition of the one becomes natural, spontaneous, unforced. Slowly, the mind's habit of fearing appearances weakens. Slowly, the reflex of reacting to conditions fades. You find that your first impulse is no longer to fix, but to observe. No longer to struggle, but to rest. No longer to resist, but to recognize. This is the practice of the presence, returning again and again to the inner awareness that God is, and nothing stands beside God. And in this practice, the old sense of a separate, vulnerable self begins to dissolve, and the truth dawns. The one power is not merely with you, it is your own being, living itself as your life. This realization cannot be forced, but it comes naturally to the heart that consistently turns inward, listens deeply, and rests in silent receptivity. As this realization of one power deepens, something remarkable begins to occur, not through effort or discipline, but through the natural activity of spirit in your consciousness. Life itself changes. You will discover that fear begins to lose its foundation. For fear is always the product of believing that something outside you has power. When you no longer grant that power, the emotion has nothing to attach itself to, and it simply fades. You will notice that the anxieties you once carried about health, finances, relationships, or future events do not grip you as they once did. It is not that you have become careless or indifferent, but that you sense more deeply each day that the infinite invisible governs all things without your supervision. And as this trust becomes your way of being, you will find that the body responds with greater harmony because you are no longer holding it in fear. Supply begins to appear without struggle because you are no longer affirming lack as a power. Relationships soften and heal because you no longer see another as an opposing presence, but as the same one life shining through a different form. You will also observe that your reactions change. Where you once might have defended, argued, or resisted, you now meet the moment with quietness because you know that nothing external can impose itself upon the one presence. When you walk into your day, you feel less like a human being trying to manage life and more like an instrument through which life reveals itself. Even ordinary tasks acquire a sense of grace, for you begin to see that every action, washing dishes, speaking with a friend, answering a letter, is the movement of the one appearing as activity. You discover a joy that does not depend on circumstances, a peace that does not depend on outcomes, a freedom that does not depend on the human picture. This is not the peace the world gives, which is always conditional. It is the peace that comes from knowing that nothing stands outside of God, nothing threatens God, and therefore nothing can threaten you. For you and the Father are one. As duality dissolves, you find yourself living from the inside out, no longer pushed or pulled by appearances, but guided from within by a presence that is always wise, always loving, always sufficient unto every moment. This is the beginning of true spiritual living, where life unfolds not by your plans, but by the quiet, steady revelation of the one that lives your life for you. And so, my friends, as we come to the close of this hour together, let us gather the thread of our journey and return once more to the simple truth upon which all spiritual realization rests. There is only one presence, one power, one life, and that one is the very essence of your own being. Whatever fears you have carried, whatever doubts have followed you, whatever burdens have weighed upon your heart, all of these arise from the belief that something exists apart from God, something with power to influence your good. But now you know that this was never so. Separation was never a fact, only a belief. Duality was never a condition, only a thought. And the moment that belief dissolves, even faintly, the light of your true identity begins to shine through, revealing a presence that has never left you, a love that has never wavered, a life that has never been threatened. From this moment forward, let your practice be simple. Do not struggle with truth. Do not try to force spiritual realization. Instead, pause throughout your day and quietly remember there is only one presence here. Nothing stands beside it. Let this recognition become the gentle undercurrent of all your activities. When challenges arise, let your first response be inward. Father, thou art the only power. When joys appear, let your gratitude flow to the invisible source. That alone is the giver of all good. And above all, rest. Rest in the assurance that the one power that governs the universe is the very life living as you. There is nothing to achieve, nothing to attain, nothing to reach. There is only the unveiling of what has always been true. In this awareness, you walk in the world not as a struggling human being, but as a transparency through which the grace of God shines unhindered. And as this realization grows, your presence becomes a blessing without your effort. a quiet, healing influence wherever you stand. So let us part for now with this simple remembrance. You and the Father are one, and in that oneness lies all peace, all safety, all fulfillment. Return to it often, rest in it deeply, and let the one presence reveal itself as your life, your mind, your being. And as you do, you will discover that the journey is not toward God, but from God, the one living its own life as you.